A man bleeds behind the wheel of a car at night, begging to get to a hospital. He can't breathe. Hold on to that moment. We're coming back to it. Weeks earlier, a schoolteacher named John and his wife Lara are at a tense dinner with another couple. A joke about office politics spirals into a real argument about ambition, marriage, and who really runs a room. The two women trading barbs that get personal fast, one accusing the other of flirting with her husband right at the table. It's ugly, it's sharp, and by the time everyone heads home, you already know this marriage runs hot, which matters because it's about to be tested in a way none of them can imagine. The next morning is ordinary in every way that counts. John makes breakfast. Their young son Luke clowns around at the counter, and Lara half jokes that she may have just torched her career by calling a co-worker a name to her face the day before. It's a small, warm, unremarkable morning, and the film wants you to feel exactly how normal this family is, right before it stops being normal at all. Then the police arrive, not with questions, with a warrant. Lara is arrested for the murder of a woman named Elizabeth Gieses, cuffed and read her rights in her own kitchen while Luke screams for his mother, and John is physically held back by officers just trying to reach his own son. One morning, she's needling her husband about a work fight. The next, she's being taken away for murder, and her 5-year-old is the one who has to watch it happen. Time jumps forward. John is raising Luke largely alone now, and prison visits have become routine, Luke playing nearby while his parents talk logistics. But buried in the small talk is a loose thread, a coat button, snagged and lost the night of the murder, that was never recovered. A film doesn't mention a detail like that twice for no reason. That thread doesn't go anywhere, not yet. Lara's attorney, Meyer, delivers the news John's been dreading. The appeal is dead. No new evidence can be submitted. The courts have ruled it a robbery, and the Supreme Court hasn't touched a murder case in 30 years. Worse, when John pushes him, Meyer admits it outright. He no longer believes in her innocence. Legally, Lara isn't getting out. John leans on Lara's parents to help hold things together for Luke. Card games, birthday letters passed through prison mail, the small rituals of a family trying to stay a family from opposite sides of a wall. The appeal's collapse breaks something. Lara attempts suicide in prison. John gets the call and races to the hospital, and for a few unbearable minutes staff won't even confirm she's alive, let alone let him see her. When he finally reaches her bedside, it's clear this isn't just a legal case anymore. It's a countdown. Sitting in on a college class about freedom and literary escape stories plants something in John's head. He starts digging, quietly, alone, at a library computer, and finds a memoir by a man who actually broke out of prison and stayed free. The title, Over the Walls. He tracks the author down. Over diner coffee, a former escapee named Damon Pennington lays out, in blunt, specific detail, exactly what it takes to break someone out of prison and actually stay free. Precise timing, forged documents, a destination that won't draw attention, and far more money than John has ever had in his life. But Pennington's Real warning isn't logistical, it's moral. Can you kill a guard? Leave your own kid at a gas station? Push an old woman to the ground because she's standing between you and a door? Because that's who you'd have to become to actually pull this off? And if you can't become that person, you shouldn't start. John listens to every word of it, and he doesn't walk away. What follows is months of quiet, meticulous preparation. John photographs the jail, times police response routes, and maps every bridge and tunnel that could be sealed off in a lockdown. He starts sourcing forged identity documents and learns to defeat a lock with something called a bump key. Piece by piece, an ordinary schoolteacher is assembling a criminal operation. The strain starts to show. John gets into a real fight after a stranger mocks Lara's guilt to his face. On a public jail tour, security footage catches him somewhere he shouldn't be, and a jail employee pulls him aside with a pointed warning about what happens to his kids if both parents end up behind bars. And at school pickup, a widowed mother named Nicole and her daughter Carrie offer him a quiet, ordinary kindness he can't quite let himself accept. John forges Lara a new identity, with Luke unknowingly helping him edit the photo. He puts the family house up for sale to fund what's coming, and starts researching hyperkalemia, a lethal potassium overdose, while timing a private medical transport van down to the second. He isn't just preparing anymore. He's building a machine, but the plan is starting to fray him. Disguised in a cap and sunglasses, John has a terrifying near-miss with a mother and her child in a parking lot and gets thrown bodily out of a building. He isn't as invisible as he thinks, and neither the police nor ordinary strangers are going to stop noticing him. It boils over in a prison visitation booth. Lara accuses John of never once asking whether she actually did it. Well, then you'd be wrong, she says, and doesn't explain what she means. Later on the phone, she softens. She doesn't believe he did it. She tells him, and she never will. It's tender, and it's deliberately unresolved. The preparation deepens into something darker. Night after night, John is back at it, cutting through locks and cables with bolt cutters, stashing a motorcycle he'll need later, meeting forgers in empty lots to trade cash for documents. One deal with a passport contact nearly turns violent. A tense exchange through a car window that ends with someone shouting that he wants too much too fast. and that he's going to get everyone killed. Every version of this plan runs through the same bottleneck. Money John doesn't come close to having. And that's the problem he's about to solve in the worst possible way. To fund the escape, John and two accomplices break into the home of Alex Gaidar, a known violent criminal with a history of drug trafficking, and rob him at gunpoint. It goes wrong almost immediately. Gaidar refuses to give up where his money is, taunting them with a gun in his face, and the robbery spirals into torture. Threats, a lit stove, his own son awake somewhere upstairs the entire time. Someone in that house ends up critically hurt. The crew flees with a safe full of cash, but whatever line John thought he wouldn't cross to save his wife, he has already crossed it. And this is where we come back to the beginning. That man in the car, gasping that he can't breathe, that's the aftermath of this robbery, playing out in full. Police, fire crews, and forensic photographers swarm the scene. A detective identifies the victim as Alex Gaidar, exactly the man the file says he is. It isn't an innocent man's blood, but it's blood all the same, and now there's a second body, found on a transit bench, to go with it. Shaken and injured, John drives home. He doesn't call anyone, doesn't explain anything, he just sits with his sleeping son for a long moment, then says a quiet goodbye to Lara's parents, still pretending everything is normal. Streets away, detectives are already combing through the wreckage of the robbery, working a crime scene that will eventually lead straight back to him. He finishes packing. Cash, tools, a gun, every map and photo torn down off his wall and destroyed. He drops Luke at a friend's birthday party with a vague excuse about errands. What he doesn't know is that detectives have just traced a cracked taillight from the robbery to a Prius, registered to a schoolteacher whose wife is serving life for murder. The net tightens from both directions at once. Detectives pull John's name and home address. And inside the prison, staff discover something is critically wrong with Lara, the very plan John researched weeks earlier, now quietly in motion. She's rushed to an outside hospital under armed guard, disguised as hospital staff in white coats. John and an accomplice corner Lara's guards at gunpoint inside her room. It isn't the clean extraction he planned. The guards warn him he'll be shot before he ever makes it out of the building. And Lara herself refuses to go along with it at first, won't put on the clothes, won't move, until John forces her hand. He makes her call Luke and tell him, in a voice that has to sound normal, that she isn't coming home either. It's a lie built to buy them a head start, a decoy to throw anyone listening off their trail, but watching her have to say it to her own son is its own kind of horror for both of them. The escape detonates almost immediately. Someone clocks that something is wrong, and within seconds the hospital is locked down, security radios crackling, officers pouring into the corridors from every direction. John and Lara run, first through the hallway, then down a stairwell, John holding the guards back at gunpoint while Lara moves ahead of him. They cut through service areas and past startled staff and out into the parking garage, police sealing off exits behind them floor by floor, closing in faster than they can find a way clear. Nothing about it looks like a plan anymore, just two people trying to stay one door ahead of a building closing in around them. Outside, it turns into a full citywide manhunt. John and Lara shed their disguises and melt into a crowd of hockey fans pouring out of a game. Exactly the kind of noise and color a fleeing couple needs to disappear into. One more jacket in a sea of identical ones. They duck down into the subway, but police are already broadcasting a description, blocking platforms, stopping trains on every line the moment word reaches dispatch. Officers fan out through the station, radios barking orders to seal every exit, checking faces against a printout that's barely off the machine, while John and Lara keep moving, always one platform ahead, ducking behind pillars, doubling back before a face turns their way. Eventually, the tunnels themselves become the escape route. They scramble along the rail bed in the dark, past warning signs and coiled razor wire, a train passing close enough to feel before climbing over a chain-link fence just as a pursuing detective closes the distance behind them. His hand hits the wire a second after theirs leaves it. It's the closest anyone comes to catching them all day. On the other side is a car and a road out of the city, for now. On the run, the adrenaline gives way to panic. John admits he packed her insulin and a disguise kit. Lara can't quite believe how far ahead of this he's been. Exhausted, they pull over on a rural shoulder and just sit together in the grass for a moment, hands touching, before forcing themselves back into the car. Luke, meanwhile, has no idea any of this is happening. Nicole has him exactly where she said she would, at the zoo and then the aquarium, pointing out sharks and beluga whales while his parents are somewhere across the city running for their lives. It doesn't stay a local story for long. Within hours, the manhunt spreads across state lines. John and Lara's photos broadcast to every police department, train station, and airport within a few hundred miles. John and Lara collect Luke and make a run for the airport, three of them moving together for the first time since the escape began. Security is already tightened, officers searching bags, watching faces, comparing travelers against a description that's been circulating for hours. Every step through the terminal is a chance to be recognized. Back at the investigation, a torn photograph pulled from John's wall breaks the case open. a collapsed presidential palace, the kind of image that was all over the news after an earthquake. Investigators realize exactly where this family is trying to disappear to, and the sheer scale of what a schoolteacher has managed to pull off leaves them stunned. And somehow they make it. A sun-drenched coastal town, boats swaying in the harbor, a vintage car winding along a cliffside road above the water, John, Lara, and Luke, together, an ocean away from every police radio, every roadblock, every checkpoint that was chasing them. Back home, though, the case never really closes. Years later, the original detective returns to the crime scene in the rain, still searching a drainage basin for that missing coat button, the same detail raised in a prison visiting room, right at the start of all this. He isn't chasing a fugitive anymore. He's chasing a doubt. The film ends not on the chase, but on a quiet room. John sitting on the edge of a bed, watching Lara and Luke sleep, safe, together, in a home none of them ever expected to have. Whether Lara Brennan was actually guilty is a question this story never answers. It just lets her family live with it. That's it for this recap. Like, subscribe, and comment the movie you want to see next. See you in the next one.